During nearly 3 decades of working as an ICU and then hospice nurse, my guest has cared for many sick and dying people. And she believes the end of their lives is often unnecessarily difficult, even for those who believe that they've made a plan. Here to explain why she has hopes that a proposed law can change this is Meredith Fischer, registered nurse and graduate nursing student at the University of Florida. Welcome, Meredith.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So, before we get into the weeds of the legislation, explain a little bit about what your experience has been dealing with people and patients at the end of their lives.
So often, what I've seen in the ICU environment is people feel that they have planned for their end of life care wishes in the form of a living will, only to find that that is not an actionable medical order in time of an emergency. And then, the statistics show that only 1 in 3 Americans have actually filled out living wills or advance directives. And so we really want to stress the importance of having the goals of care conversations, especially when people are seriously ill and approaching end of life.
Sure. And so, when you say that something isn't an actionable medical plan when they get to the end of life, most of us maybe don't know what that means. So, what does that mean practically speaking?
So, living wills are legal documents that are created with your lawyer, and there's also free forms online that you can complete, such as the Honoring Choices format or the Five Wishes format. But these are just forms that kind of guide future care that will help your family make decisions for you if you cannot make them for yourselves. And so, what this bill would do is create an actionable medical document that would be portable from setting to setting so that in times of an emergency, the EMS or first responders can actually honor this document. And it goes beyond what a DNR order would state.
A DNR is a do not resuscitate, but I want to stick with the living will because that is something a lot of people do create. Not enough people, but a lot of people do. And so you're saying that that can be used to guide family members about what care you might like to receive, but it isn't necessarily something that a doctor can look to as a directive saying this is what you should do, this is what you are being told to do and act upon that and be protected when they act upon it based on those recommendations.
Not in times of emergency. Certainly, once you are in a healthcare facility, the family can present the living will, or maybe it's already uploaded to their electronic registry, and then they can look for it to help guide decision making once you're already there. But in times of emergencies, they are not going to be able to interpret that document to guide those critical decisions.
And so when somebody is in a state of emergency, and you've seen this happen many times, tell us what is happening. Even if somebody's advance directive says, look, I don't want aggressive treatment at end of life, but an emergency happens. What happens automatically then?
So the default is to do everything. So if someone is at home and they have an elderly family member and they have a living will in a file cabinet, maybe they don't have one at all, but you've had a conversation that the your family member would not want CPR or taken to the hospital or any number of interventions. Um, Oftentimes these documents, if they do have them, they're outdated and like I say, they can't find them and they're not actionable. So we need a document for this vulnerable population that are seriously ill, medically fragile. They need a way to translate their medical wishes into an immediately actionable medical order. And most states have already done this.
It is more than, I would guess, just frustrating for family members or care providers like yourself to see extraordinary measures taken or aggressive interventions made when you know that someone specifically doesn't want that. Can you just talk a little bit about what you've seen family members go through or what you and your colleagues have experienced?
So I'm not a first responder, so I'm there kind of, after for the aftercare in the ICU environment in my past. But there's first responders I've spoken to say, if they arrive on scene and they cannot find their DNR order, the first responders are required to do everything and perform CPR on that individual. So, this bill would create an electronic registry, which would help fill in some of those gaps so that first responders could find out what the person's wishes are before they arrive on scene and they can act upon them because they're assigned medical order.
So what is happening though for the people who are doing those interventions when they know that they perhaps ought not to, that the patient doesn't want it? Or what are family members? How are they receiving that when that's happening?
They're very angry. They will be telling the first responders, please don't do this. They do not want it. And without that actionable medical order, they have to perform those interventions.
And I would guess that that is a very difficult situation to be in.
It's very distressful because, ultimately we want our family members to receive the kind of care that they want. And as a nurse, and this is why I'm here, is because I am a patient advocate. I want our patients to receive the kind of care that they want. And people that are in that phase of life and that are seriously ill, multiple hospitalizations. Most of this population, when you survey them, the statistics show that 80% of this population they prefer to avoid aggressive end of life interventions. Florida ranks, unfortunately, one of the top states in the nation for aggressive end of life care in the last 12 months of life. The Dartmouth Atlas Project in 2023 states that Florida is sixth in the nation for aggressive end of life care in the last 12 months.
Meaning likelier to deliver that kind of aggressive intervention at the end.
Interventions.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so you talk about a DNR, that's a do not resuscitate order. That is a medically recognized legal document, but it's lacking in a lot of ways that people are not aware of. First and foremost, something that you told me but before that we started here is that it's limited in terms of the kinds of interventions it prohibits, things that are very specific, CPR, intubation. There beyond that, there's all kinds of things that could be done. Can you just sort of explain why the DNR is limited and the ways in which it's limited?
So there's, all types of aggressive interventions that people want to avoid. Sometimes people do not want to go to the hospital. So a DNR does not mean do not treat. A DNR is limited to interventions when someone doesn't have a pulse or they're not breathing. So I have an example here with me today. This is the document from Georgia, and they call it POST. In Florida, we're set to call it a patient directed medical order. But the POST document in Georgia has they're all very similar across the nation, and they address whether you want antibiotics, whether you want a feeding tube, whether you want IV hydration, and it goes kind of beyond that to limited IV hydration for a period of time or a trial period of artificial nutrition.
So you can be
So
very
you can
specific.
be very specific. And then it has comfort measures, limited interventions, or full treatment. So it's the whole spectrum of the kind of care that you want.
I think it's important too to let people know that in any case, these directives are not used if you are able to speak for yourself.
Correct.
They don't take over if
Correct.
you are conscious and wanting to change your mind. They are
Hmm.
always something that you can modify if you are able.
Right.
Okay. We're talking about legislation to provide changes to how end of life care is delivered here in Florida. And if you'd like to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937, or you can email First Coast Connect at wjct.org. We have a call from Charles on the west side. Good morning, Charles. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I had a procedure 2 weeks ago at St. Vincent's, and when I had to sign my consent form, down at the bottom where it said had the option for DNR, there was like a little parenthesis off to the side that said something to the effect of must be approved by the state of Florida or by the state of Florida or something like that that I'd never seen before. It's like, you know, somebody had to check off on my wishes or something. Can you tell me what that was about?
So, what I believe that was referring to is that in order for a DNR order form in the state of Florida to be valid, it must be on yellow paper and it must be signed by your healthcare provider. So there's a process that you have to go to through to make that form valid, rather than just that checkbox on the bottom of your admission form.
We also have a question from Michelle. She asked if the bill that's being proposed would hold nursing facilities accountable for not pointing out a posted DNR. We know that nursing facilities have a lot of responsibilities. If first responders are coming in, it is possible sometimes. I would guess that a posted DNR or a DNR that's on file might not always be communicated to a first responder. Is there anything that tries to compel people who are running a facility like that, compel them to communicate that to first responders?
There is no legislation that penalizes a facility for misplacing the document or not honoring the document. It's really up to the families to voice their concerns if something is not followed. I had that happen with one of my friends' family members just this past summer. The facility could not find his DNR. And what this legislation would do, and he ended up intubated, all the things that he did not want. But this legislation would provide that electronic registry so that even before first responders arrive on scene, they can find out what their wishes are before they get there. And it is actionable. They can act upon the wishes they see uploaded to the registry because it is a signed medical order.
So there's not this fumbling looking for
Correct.
the DNR. It's on file with the state, and all of these medical professionals would have access to it.
Correct.
Yeah. Um, it is then actionable, meaning that they can act upon it. But this bill would also offer some protections. Can you sort of explain why that's important if a first responder is acting on a medical order like this, that they be insulated from civil penalties or lawsuits or even criminal penalties?
Right. So the Florida Do Not Resuscitate order that is filled out correctly is provides the medical professionals with immunity from prosecution for honoring the document. So if the medical professional is presented with this document, it is properly filled out, they are protected for honoring what is on there. So that would be the same for this new legislation. If there was a Florida created patient directed medical order, then the individuals honoring this document would be protected from prosecution.
All right. So I want to talk just about how we kind of got here with this legislation, because as we mentioned, you're a nursing student, you're going for your advanced degree, but you've worked for a number of years. And now all of a sudden you're, an advocate in Tallahassee, you're pushing for legislation. How did you make that jump?
So it's interesting. I've been a bedside nurse for 28 years now, and I made the transition from the ICU to hospice about 10 years ago. And coincidentally, about 10 years ago, I was flying cross country from the Pacific Northwest back to Florida, and I heard uh, a group of people or a couple of people discussing this document, the Pulse document, that most states already have. And they were also mentioning that Florida doesn't currently have this. So fast forward to where I am today, and I'm back in school to pursue a Doctor of Nursing Practice degree with the University of Florida. I want to be a nurse practitioner. A healthcare policy class had us write a letter to a legislator to voice our support for a healthcare policy that we're passionate about. And I did that, and to my surprise, I received a response within a few hours asking to meet with me to discuss this issue. So that's kind of how I got connected with the key leaders in this state to promote this legislation. There were already bills in the works. So I have now been collaborating with them for a year and a half to get the grassroots support to get this legislation over the finish line.
And so you had to, this was an effort that started more than a year ago for you. Initially, there was some resistance from some lobbying groups associated with nurses. You were able to kind of modify, address the concerns that they had, go through the procedures that they require.
Mhm.
Um, and so this now is a bill that is widely supported. What is the current status of it in Tallahassee? What's happening with it?
So we need to get it on the healthcare committee agendas. So if they do not hear it in the healthcare committees, the bill cannot advance to the next steps. So that's what we need now is we need them to put it on the agenda to be discussed in the healthcare
Do
committees.
we know why it's not being scheduled?
Some of the lawmakers in Tallahassee are not aware of how important this legislation is. So it's just simply not on their priority. And so we need to educate them to help them understand why this healthcare legislation is so important. We need to discuss it. We need to get it on the agenda.
It is one of those things that I would guess a lot of people are unaware of until they encounter it themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there has been some questions raised, about concerns that this could be a slippery slope. I don't know how widely discussed those are, but people are always concerned when it comes to end of life care that somehow you might be stepping on someone's rights. Somehow this could be advancing um, more of a agenda similar to euthanasia. Can you kind of address, how this differs from a kind of volitional life ending
Right.
opportunity as opposed to just kind of a medical care directive?
So, this legislation really empowers patients to get the kind of care that they want. So, like, for example, this post from Georgia says, I want full treatment. So, a DNR order um, specifies that they do not want any life saving interventions in the form of CPR. So, this form is not about euthanasia. This form is about giving a person the agency and the ability to specify what kind of wishes they do want and what kind of medical interventions they do not want.
Because nobody is required to accept medical care, but the medical system is, as you say, set up almost as a default to do those interventions
Right.
unless you tell them not to.
Right.
Yeah. So there is an element of this bill that I was interested in because it does specifically say that necessary healthcare services will be provided regardless of decisions to withhold or withdraw life-saving procedures. So basically, even if a first responder is being told, don't deliver these intubations, don't perform CPR, the bill also still provides for what's considered necessary healthcare services. That's just basic, like, um, care, of a person. Is that kind of what that specifies?
I'm not completely sure I follow the question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I do either. I mean, I this is actually something that I wanted to address with you before we sat down. So the bill says that it mandates necessary healthcare services be provided regardless of decisions to withhold or withdraw life prolonging
So,
procedures.
right, it doesn't mean don't care for the individual.
Mhm.
This is about the care that they do want. It's not about the care it's not about limiting care. It's about giving the kind of care that aligns with their goals and wishes. So it really gives people the ability to align if they have a living will. It gives them the ability to translate that living will into a medical order that can be followed.
Has this debate become any more significant in kind of the post-pandemic era? Do you think that there is any more awareness that that brought to people about, how people are receiving healthcare at the end of life? Just kind of that broader experience with mass illness like that.
I think so. I think so. And what's interesting is a lot of the conferences I go to and the people I talk to that have lived in other states, they're like, "Oh yeah, we had this document in the state where I'm from, and it was so helpful." Sometimes there are healthcare providers in other states, and they're like, "I can't believe Florida doesn't have this already."
Mhm.
So just getting the awareness of how this can help our patients get the kind of care that they want is my goal to educate people why this bill is important and why we need it.
We have a call from Mark in St. Augustine. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Good morning. I've been a nurse for the last 15 or 20 years in many different settings, hospital, bedside, I spent a year in ICU. Now I'm at a skilled nursing facility. But I've seen this, and this is kind of interesting. You'll have a patient that has a DNR, it's a yellow page with the black, it's filled out perfectly. And then you get a relative come in to see the dying next of kin and say, no, we don't want that. All life-saving measures. And more often than you would believe, the doctor will say, okay, hold on here. Let's, full measures until they get this sorted out, even though you have that document. And that's always kind of amazed me, but you see it frequently. So does she have any comment about that?
Absolutely. I know exactly what you're talking about. So, with advanced care planning, the number one thing that they tell you in the beginning is choose your healthcare decision proxy carefully. And if they cannot honor your wishes, you need to choose someone else. For example, I'm not sure that my husband could follow my wishes. And so oftentimes people may designate their neighbor because they have the conversation with their friend. They tell them, these are my wishes. I know that my family would not be capable of honoring my wishes, so I'm going to designate you. And so having that conversation with your family, designating the person that can honor your wishes is vitally important to having your wishes honored.
I wonder if you think that we just all need to know a little bit more about what some end of life outcomes are. I mean, when people are fighting for their loved ones in those final hours and saying, we want everything done, they may not know what everything done looks like or kind of whether those uh, actions would actually have any benefit long term, actually be sustaining, whether their loved one would be perhaps in a different kind of pain. I mean, things like CPR can cause all kinds of damage, for instance, on someone's,
Right.
body
Broken
and
ribs.
sure.
Right. So there's a lot out there, a lot of books, a lot of documentaries. There's a great book called Being Mortal um, uh, that talks about this issue. And what some people have said is, in the U.S., we're not living longer, we're dying longer.
Mm.
So all of these interventions, sometimes they're just prolonging death. And really, what we want to do is promote goal concordant care and quality of life. And the states that have this document have shown that these individuals have better quality of life.
Sure, because I mean, there can also be a life that is saved and then sort of just remains in a static circumstance for a long, long time. That can often be a lot harder for families.
Correct.
Yeah. Got a call from Lily on the north side. Good morning, Lily. Go ahead.
Hi.
Lily, I think we may have lost you. You there? You there, Lily?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi. I am calling with a question regarding hospitals' internal policies. I know that Baptist downtown, they have a policy where even if a patient comes in with a yellow physician signed DNR, they will not acknowledge that per se on its own. They will require the patient to sign an additional internal document to make it valid for their hospital. And it's called a A&D form, allow natural death. So there's actually three options. You can be a full code, a A&D with active treatment, or just like a regular DNR. And it's often confusing to the patients, and it's confusing as a nurse because there are little caveats. It seems like it overcomplicates the DNR process. You can have I want if my heart stops, I want chest compressions, but I don't want to be intubated. Or if my heart stops, I don't want to be intubated. I want chest compressions, but I don't want any medications. So what would this policy do for that? Would it make it so that everything was streamlined, that their facilities would have to just honor the the yellow DNR that the patient has?
This this policy, this bill would not change those internal documents at your healthcare facilities. You know, every healthcare facility is different in what they require internally. So this document, its value is really in the outside the acute care setting, before the patient arrives, so that first responders know what their wishes are immediately. And then it can also guide care for patients and their family members once they arrive to an acute care facility. But really, we need to not get the patients on the aggressive care kind of treadmill, if you will, kind of upstream before they arrive to the facility.
We also have a call from Rosemary in St. Augustine. Good morning, Rosemary. Go ahead.
Thank you. My question is about the actual doctors, because I had a sister that had a DNR and no extreme measures. And when they said she was having trouble breathing, they were going to put her on not the tube that goes down your throat, but the something that goes over your mouth and your nose. And then 2 weeks later, they told me that was an extreme measure. So because they didn't tell me in advance, I said, okay.
Right. This is challenging. So this is where these goals of care conversations, before someone is unable to speak for themselves, is so important. So having that conversation, designating the person that will speak for you on your behalf once you cannot, because as the caller pointed out earlier, if your designated healthcare person cannot honor your wishes, um, your forms are not going to save you. You're going to have to designate the right person, but you need the right forms in place in advance.
So, what are you advising folks to do if they care about this issue or they want to see this legislation move forward?
You need to contact your legislators. Everybody needs to call and write and tell them to get it on the healthcare agenda, to get it um, heard in committee so that we can move this bill to the next step. We need people's stories to share with these legislators so that they know how important this legislation is.
So, this is House Bill 353, Senate Bill 566.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, Meredith Fisher. It's a pleasure to meet you. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right.